Hello. Welcome once again. My name is Steve Giguere.
And I'm his co-host, Mike Foster.
Welcome to your Cloud Native video newsletter for your impatient world, where we distill the best curated content from throughout the week about security, Kubernetes, big acquisitions, things that just make you go, what? And as always, a bit of a technical dive at the end of the show.
Yes, for the technical dive, we're doing a quick Podman demo. We have a 9.8 CVE, some CNCF drama, little drama going on that we're going to talking about. Robinhood breach, thick with irony, and talking supply chain security as always. So thanks for joining, and happy Friday. Yes, we're coming in on Friday instead of Thursday. So thanks for joining.
My fault.
That's all right. If you're watching
this Black Hat yesterday. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you watch this recording on YouTube, like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you want to see. We do have the end of the year quick demo wrap up that we're gonna go through. Probably do that week before the holidays, so we get some time off. And then, of course, if you're watching on Twitch, give us a follow. Black Hat, what was the wrap up? What did you think, Steve?
Sucked.
Why? What happened?
Yeah. Well, I after carefully blagging a ticket, so I could go to the live, because I just think it would have been. I was excited about going to a conference, Black Hat EU, by the way, worth making it clear. To go to something live, and Black Hat's kind of been a cool conference to go to in the past. But it was like of the second day, which is where I could go, there were 69, 70 things you could go to. But if you filtered out sponsored content and virtual ones where you just couldn't see anybody, or you were watching a screen, say, right, not where you go, there was only 19 live things left. And of that, 3 didn't show up, of which was what I wanted. So it was like, but loads of vendors, tickets were like $1,000. It was
just vendors selling to vendors.
It just seemed like, I don't know, they went hybrid, and it did not justify the cost, really. Like, with those, the venue was the London XL, which is a huge and probably really expensive venue, but I would imagine if I ran that, I'd be like, wow, that didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And just across generally the tone of it, I expect Black Hat to be a bit more edgy and a little bit more DEF CON-y, and it feels like it's gone a little bit more corporate, a little bit more maybe.
Yeah, most of those events, it's to see a bunch of people in the ecosystem, right, that you work with, travel a little bit, and that the fun aspect of those events, I think, aren't quite there yet. So,
yeah, maybe. I think I had a good debate with somebody recently about whether we should run meetups as hybrids, or even when we do them live, etc. And the general consensus was no. Make it so you have to go get the content, so that you get the networking and you get all the things out of it. Because the moment you give someone an opportunity to be lazy and watch them from home, then suddenly nobody goes, and you don't get any of the real side benefits.
I think the hybrid works if you release the videos later. So it's like, hey, come and show up, and then if you want, you can get the videos like a month or a month and a half later.
Oh, you mean that version of hybrid? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like live hybrid. And then you can also avoid all the technical issues too by just recording stuff, right? So it's like, a little bit better. Anyways, let's get into, hopefully you didn't catch anything. Get that cough out.
I'm still getting the cold over the cold. No, you sound better today. All right.
Getting there. But we'll get into the general news.
I like that. I forgot we had a sting for that now. Very cool.
Yeah, very nice.
All right. The first one, I added it, so I'll take you through it because it's a little bit more difficult. It was a video that was released. I heard about it through Clint Gibler, general guru about all things security. But it was SolarWinds This was at Supply Chain Security Con, one of the many cons that I didn't sign up for at KubeCon. So I didn't even know it happened. And it's SolarWinds talking about themselves, the way they got hacked, how they got hacked, and then what they're doing about it now. And it's definitely worth a watch at the moment. I just kind of stopped at certain moments and got some highlights on it. Like, for example, the new system with top level requirements, where they went, because they're there because they're talking a lot about open source. Jumping overhead to here, how they chose Tecton, how they eliminated Circle CI and certain other, and just how the general vulnerability potential of a SaaS based solution, which was like, yeah, you're adding a big part to your supply chain when you're taking it out of your own control.
Yep.
And then moving on a little bit further, getting into the combination of in toto for attestation of every action and how they started to integrate that in. They have this funny logo. This is the SLSA, which by the way, I've just dropped in right here. Salsa. Supply chain levels for software artifacts. So this is another project that they're using as guidance for the way they're implementing everything here. So it's not long. It's like 30 minutes if you cut all the faff, and even faster if you do what I do and you watch it on like, times 1,000 as fast as you can. But you get some really quite clear diagrams. Like if you're looking to build a secure supply chain, follow the work of the people who just got hacked.
Yeah. How did they get the first user access into SolarWinds? It was a password, right?
I think it was something pretty.
It was like a 1, 2, 3 password, and they were blaming the intern, if I remember correctly. And then because the supply chain was leaky, they were able to get greater impact. Because talk about image signing quite a lot, but I believe that was already in their pipeline and that were exploited. The issue was user access at the beginning, right?
Well, that's true, but
start.
That's not what they're addressing. Yeah, what they're doing is, if the same thing happened again, the same user access happened again, they now would spot.
Impact's a lot lower. They would be able to spot it, because you're not going to be able to secure every user access all the time. Somebody eventually is going to slip up.
And the way they injected that DLL mid supply chain, mid build, they would catch it now. Nice. So they're not necessarily fixing what you would call a very straightforward root cause, on which I'm sure they have fixed that, but that's not very good talk for KubeCon, is it? So they're talking about the technical aspect of the supply chain in this, and it is a really good talk. So it's in the show notes. You can go watch it, but I think it's worth 30 minutes of your time.
For sure. That one, I also love Spotify, like in 2019, talking about how they brought down infrastructure twice. That was a pretty good one. They're like, we brought down our Europe and North America infrastructure twice with Terraform. Like, here's why we still remained available, because we had like HA set up and all this stuff. It's good talk.
Yeah, that's good. I should dig that out again.
Yeah. More resources coming up, Steve.
So one thing I want to ask you a question before we move on to this. Maybe you can explain this to me.
Sure.
You're a man in the know. So see the damn goose, right?
Yeah.
Remember last week we talked about scorecard?
Oh.
What is this goose?
Cyberduck?
I don't know, but it's one of these things where it's like, that's the same goose. So, and this is me not knowing what's going on. One thing I do, I don't know. It just, when I saw it there, I thought, wait a second, that's the goose from the scorecard. And then I started thinking, oh, is this one of these like Sig honk things with the goose and all that? And it's like one of those.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't understand that. That's one of those things where by the time I came into Kubernetes, people were writing honk everywhere, and no one was, unless you knew why, no one was ever explaining why. And I still don't necessarily know why everybody does it. It just feels like this club.
Yeah, it was this. From what I remember, it's the duck game. It's like the Untitled Goose game. This game you can download where literally a goose runs around this English town, pissing off neighbors, and like you can go and pick up keys from people and bite people as the goose. And then for some reason that caught on, I think in 2019 as the inside joke. We're not on the inside though, so joke over our head.
Yeah, I don't like inside jokes. All right.
Moving on to some resources for new security books out.
Boom.
Friend of the show.
Yeah.
Two friends of the show.
Yeah, totally. We have Andrew Martin, Michael Hasenblas. They have just released finally, only like over a year in the making. It says explore preview right now. I just got it. Actually, I should have had it with me. I could have flipped through it, but I'm not sure what that would have proven. Just trust me, I have one. What I was pretty surprised at just flipping through it, like I know that Andy wanted to release this originally at the beginning of this year, not in October of this year, right? And yet there is a lot of content in it that is from this year. Like there's a lot of very modern references in it that wouldn't have happened if it had come out in February. And so, yeah,
it was worth the wait.
It was worth the wait. Yeah.
And look, another duck.
And another, whatever that is.
Goose.
Duck thing, goose. I don't know what it is.
Canadian rat.
Yeah. It's good. So go get that. Combine it with Liz's container security book, and you're
hack stuff.
You're laughing. Hack stuff. Yeah, it is funny because Andy has this obsession with Captain Hashjack. He uses the character in his capture the flags, and so there's a little bit of that. You know what? Actually, what was funny about this is that you can tell while reading who the author is without just by flipping pages, by not like, well, is Michael German? Let's assume he's German, but it's not the case of Michael's writing style and Andy's writing style is very different. Like I had a dictionary. I found myself constantly right-click looking up words going, what does this even mean? And that's Andy. He's like a Stephen Fry. He just kind of just has this vocabulary that is unintentionally broad. I don't know how he does it. He just must remember every word he ever hears. But yeah, it was funny flipping chapters and going, this is definitely a Michael chapter.
Yeah.
So check it out.
On to some privacy links. Yeah, a bunch of resources for consumption this week. The next one, it's a GitHub account. It's kind of like an awesome privacy GitHub account. And when you go through all the links, you see basically everything's free and open source. There's a ton of content. So, search engines, web browsers, how to secure them, different Android issues, social networking and platforms, two-factor authentication, encryption, cloud storage, just kind of a security best practices for all of the above. And, little things to look at. So like, avoid using like Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom. Here's some open source options. Avoid Google Drive. And when it's saying like avoid Google Drive, it means I would not necessarily use Google Drive for a lot of things that you do not want to share, let's say. I'm not saying that you can't use Google Drive to go and share things with other people, right? But do you want to be uploading all of your, I don't know, tax, personal health information, sensitive docs to Google Drive? Probably not, right? Do you want to have, you want to make sure that like OneDrive or Dropbox isn't automatically pulling your files into the cloud, because sometimes it's configured like that, right? Or iCloud storage. So, and this is obviously from a security perspective. Some people are looking at this like, well, I couldn't function, right? It's like, yeah, to be secure, it takes a little extra work, right? It's part of the gig. Avoid Google Authenticator.
Yeah. Well, that's because you can't you can't export your keys. LastPass used to be like that as well. It was a really annoying 2FA, but they've fixed it. But what blew me away is the avoid lists in here. It's basically everything we always do.
Yeah.
It's everything we do. Ah, crap.
Yeah, and a lot of it just comes to do with how they're storing data too, right? Because Maps itself isn't the issue, but all the tracking and IP and all that stuff is I guess what they're having an issue with.
You could probably do a count on the word Google, and that would be like the all-time winner. Just don't do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're free services for a reason. They have to monetize it somehow, right?
Yeah, by profiling you and sending all that data to other people. But anyway, it's a good point. It's a good list.
Yeah, and the resources at the top are what I found the most interesting as well. Just kind of breaking down all the different security topics.
Yeah, a lot of topics in there that like don't cross your mind, right? When you
Mhm.
see all this, you're going, "What? Team working tools? Notes? Sure. Yeah, it's cool.
Awesome.
Nice one.
When to use operators is next. This is I feel like the
You can handle
conversation's
this.
been going on for like 4 years now. Right?
So it's 3 at least. Well, since I'm going to blame OpenShift. Ever since Red Hat and OpenShift became super operator land.
Yeah, but you kind of need an operator if you're doing anything stateful. Like operators are the solution to stateful workloads in Kubernetes.
Okay.
You kind of do.
Is that a reason too? Is that one of the reasons?
I think that's the number one reason. It should be.
Yeah. When should you add an operator?
Well, because like even Kubernetes as a functionality you had daemon. Well, you originally had application sets, then you had deployments and daemon sets. Then they created stateful sets. Stateful sets were by design to solve for the issue of stateful workloads, because if you have a deployment, every pod that gets created up gets a new IP. If the pod goes down, it gets a new IP. And so if you're creating stateful workloads that you're expecting the IP or the DNS to be the same, it won't do that with the right. So like you need that aspect. And then you also need different upgrade features for your stateful workloads, because you don't exactly want to just be applying upgrades to your databases. That would like brick some databases, right? Depending on your tests.
Yeah.
So in general, I've always found that you can, depending on how complex the operator that you need to be is, if you're doing something fairly consistently to update, whether it be like, persistent volume storage or something like that, operators are pretty useful for things like that. And honestly, updates.
Okay.
That's like if you're getting into a sprawling ecosystem where you have, an operation team of 4 or 5 people, and you have logging and monitoring and security and some sort of storage, and then front end, back end, test. Like you need some sort of operator to manage all those updates, to at least show you like, hey, these things need to be updated. Like, do you want it automatic? What's the process? Because that's also the issue with Kubernetes in general. It's like the sprawl of applications can be too much. Simplification for the end user obviously is one of the biggest things. Just don't do a kubectl get pods -all if you have operators running, because that'll be a big list.
Yeah, that would think that's what's. So this is where I don't know what I'll scroll down in a moment and see the reasons not to. We were just having a conversation before the show started about a conference where I saw somebody complaining about tools, the vast breadth of tools within the CNCF ecosystem. But he was also complaining that he comes from InfoSec and he likes the idea that if he says he's going to deploy X, say, into AWS, then he looks at AWS and he goes, yes, everything I expected to be there is there. And then when you get operators, it really muddies the water about what is supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there.
Yes, loss of user control is one of the biggest things. The operator is responsible for deploying it. However, many users prefer to know exactly what is being deployed on their system. Since an operator's responsibility to manage the resources, the operator may also unknowingly overwrite any manual user changes.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Number 1. There you go. Yeah.
And maintenance burden. The operator is an additional piece of code that needs to be maintained. So, I mean, there's the loss of user control is the pro and the con, right? Because it should be by default so that you can't. The operator is the new declarative piece of information that you're supposed to refer to, and not you just saying X in the cluster, right? So there's the context has just shifted. It's more of I feel like if you're a developer bleeding into operations, you're not going to like operators because it's too heavy and all you want is like your app and running and it's in this test cluster and boom, there it is. If you're on operations side having to manage the app for the developer, you're going to want an operator, because I'm going to say this is the way it is. And if somebody comes in and tries to screw with it, it's going to automatically get corrected, and I can do automatic updates and automatic whatever, but I don't really care what the application does. I just need the management aspect. So really, I find that depending on how your team is set up in Kubernetes, like if you have a traditional like dev, ops, sec team all running in Kubernetes, operators are going to be really useful. If you have this sort of bleed between operations and developers, you might have some friction with operators, right?
Yes. So do you think security likes operators or doesn't like operators?
I think they do, from everything that I've heard in terms of use cases, mostly because you can, one, have everything through UI, two, you can set limits on the operators just as a policy level before anything gets deployed. And then three, updates are big.
Yeah.
Updates are the biggest thing.
Yeah, but security doesn't like updates.
That's exactly why, because like you can
Okay.
sit there and you can tell the operator like do not update unless X, and then when you're ready, so you go through all your testing phases. When you're ready, you just click roll out. It rolls out. If you don't like it, you can roll back right away. And so that capability of doing all that through like a user interface too, if you pay for a system like that, OpenShift, that's where the advantage is. But like, because the other side is, okay, well, security doesn't like updates. How if you're just going and deploying stuff into AWS using YAMLs, does security like that either? Like security's not gonna be happy either way.
No.
Right? With that.
There's no winning. You're right. And in fact, the concept of reverse uptime should mean that security should start liking updates. But yeah, controlled updates. So
yes, and that's and the biggest thing too is you can, depending on your app, you can set different workflows, right? Like if it's something that's stateless, that doesn't really matter too much. Like you have a Fluent delogging agent, and you know what? If we screw this up, we miss some logs for the application, but it's nothing security related. It's like, okay, well, let's just set automatic updates and we'll keep a stable channel, right?
Yeah.
But if we really care about some specific things, like we're going to monitor that. And obviously this is all in test and not in prod, but I'm saying like you can set your default workloads for the things that you actually care about, because security can't be watching every single aspect of your updates, right?
True. Yeah, makes sense.
Joe Thompson from Hashicorp did a good talk before I ramble on anymore, because I think it's time to move on. Last year or earlier this year, he did a good last KubeCon NA. He did a talk on operators and his take. It was really good.
I think I remember that. Yeah. Cool. All right. Should we move on? Something more serious?
Yes, something a lot more serious, especially talking about arguments.
When I was just losing that argument. Okay, operators. That won't scale. Oh, anyway, they do scale, don't they? That didn't work that time. This is this came as part of some completely unrelated newsletter thing I got, and I thought was funny because it was repositioning as this still works on Kubernetes, and as opposed to things to say when you're losing a technical argument. It's from the Wayback Machine, from this site that's no longer there, from January 2005. And I just started reading through it, going, just randomly picking things that, have you looked at the number of IO requests that will create? Like, nothing has changed.
That's totally inefficient on modern hardware.
That can't be generalized to a cross-platform build. You can maybe say cross-cloud now. Like it is a nice list of things if you just want to shoot, and it's not just like 28.
Oh yeah, the best one is, you used to program in Pascal, didn't you?
Yeah. Subtle jab at your credibility.
We need to fit this on a single floppy.
Yeah, okay, that I don't even think in 2005 that was meant to be the truth.
Yeah,
but it is funny. This can be dead. Can this be embedded in a toaster, for example? We need something that my mom can use. Yeah, it's good. It was pretty funny to just try and adapt any and all of these to. This is really appropriate now, but the language would be different. They're going to do that with the next version of Perl, so we should probably wait. The next version, just X, Kubernetes.
Too funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, all right, let's keep that one brief, but it was funny.
All right, last point in the general news is somewhat of an update, right?
Yeah, completely. It is. So Wiz were the ones who actually their research found the Ksdb vulnerability using Jupyter notebooks. They went into a little bit of detail on, how they exploited it and what you could do and the ramifications of the exploit. But what they didn't do, which is probably good, right? Because you want to wait until the world has fixed things or at least been given ample opportunity to do so. Go through it in significant detail, and they have now. This blog came out on the 10th, and they run into the basics of what you need to do. It's really a proper how-to. Like, set up this, run any C code to obtain root privileges by step 2, remove firewall rules. It just goes on. Like, you're like, what? Yeah, and it really is not like this. This is simple. Anybody can go through and follow this list, show what bugs they're exploiting, and away you go. What they did. It's fascinating. It's long.
Yeah, there is a lot of room in the Kubernetes space for projects that take advantage of Jupyter notebooks and like Python and R code, but focus on the scheduling aspect on the back end for a lot of these workloads. Because that, I think, is the big missing component, is like, how do you allow let's say data scientists to utilize containers? So I can just, hey, I want to work on Jupyter notebooks, but I don't want to do it in Azure. And then if I ever need to run something, I can just boom, container up and say, like, do I want to run it in parallel? Like, here are the packages to run it in parallel. Because that's another thing, is like, let's say you're using Redis and you have to upload R code, and it's this whole thing. There's, how do you scale the pods? What's the job? Blah, blah, blah. Like, you need that automation aspect of it there. I don't know. I think I haven't seen any like really, really succinct solutions for that. So I'm kind of curious if anybody's heard of it. And if you have, send it my way, because I'd like to test it out.
Got any links? Put them in the comments. We like comments on our videos, and we don't get enough. All right.
Yeah, that's why
that was really good.
Yeah, we don't get enough comments. So this is why we're saying this.
Excellent. Nice segue. Number 1.
Numero uno.
Robinhood. Monster breach. Robinhood trading app. Suffers data breach exposing 7 million users' information. It's not that long an article. It's more like a public disclosure kind of moment where they've said a third of our user bases has unauthorized access to personal information by an unidentified threat actor. So this is not one of those things where it's like, we often talked about this before. If a security researcher finds a way in, it still gets publicized in the media as a breach. So it's tough to tell when it's like, okay, in theory, your information might be out there, or we're pretty sure this was a baddie that did this.
I like that definition, Steve. I think a generational gap between that term might be there, but yeah, it's a baddie. It also is interesting as companies become global and media and releases become global. Like, is this something that obviously they had to do because they've expanded into the European market? And then do companies who aren't secure not want to go into the European market for these issues because they would have to say these things? I'm just kind of curious. Like, obviously, are you not going to expand in the European market? Because why wouldn't you if you can? There's just let's just say there's different issues with different markets, right? It's like, I don't think that if this happened in New York, they would necessarily need to release it.
Well, this is a proper breach, so they probably do, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
This isn't a theoretical one. This is the malicious
third party. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Socially engineered a customer rap, old school DEF CON style attack, and then got data out. So it's kind of funny. The reason I thought it was ironic was just because they're called Robinhood. Like, they're like a zero cost trading platform, which is for the little guy. And then what happens? Somebody stole from the incredibly rich Robinhood platform and is going to sell the data to
Robinhood.
somebody.
It was one, I think it came out in 2016. One of the biggest advantages is it has a seamless UI. It is so easy to use. Yeah. And you go to all these banking platforms. So there's that. It was also because New York was the first state to pass zero fee trading. And this was partially because trading was looked at as a rich person's game. And they're like, oh, the banks are hoarding the wealth. Like, why shouldn't the average person just be able to go and make trades? So then Robinhood's like, okay, like, yeah, free trades. Robinhood makes money on being slower to the market, and like the difference between what you put in and what the market can buy at a specific time, it pockets that margin. That's how it makes money. I will say the best use case for Robinhood, if you are into that sort of thing, is to give your kid like $500 and say at like 16 to 18 and say, here, go and trade, learn how to trade. If you lose it, you lose it. If you win money, you win money, or if you win money. If you gain money, you gain money. Because that was one of the best things when I got into it, was just learning how fast you can lose it, how fast you can. Right. Anyways, this is also kind of funny because they had the whole Wall Street Bets debacle. If you follow that one.
Doesn't matter whether I follow it. Do you want to explain now?
Oh, okay. It was when, why am I blanking on the company right now? Oh my gosh. GameStop. Yes. Thank you. When GameStop was you going way up and all this stuff, there were so many calls, I think, for GameStop that Robinhood would not have been liquid if they had to cash it all out. And so they halted trades. And the problem was because there was such a short squeeze, when they halted trades, it allowed the velocity to go the other way. And so then all of the calls against it started failing. And so it's like, well, just because you're not liquid, do you get to stop the run? That doesn't really make sense.
No.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those, like, you almost deserve to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Well, no, seriously, it's like if you allow it.
Yeah, you're right.
So I don't know if the other thing last thing about the WTF on Robinhood was, if anybody's done option trading, you can understand that you can have a theoretical loss, but not actually have that loss. And so there were kids, I think there was somebody who was 18 or 19 who put a bunch of money in, leveraged themselves to a ridiculous amount, and then lost it. It didn't lose it because it technically was theoretical, but on the Robinhood app, it showed that the person had lost like $1.1 million, and the person committed suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, you should probably put some restrictions around your platform so you're not showing that somebody lost like $1.1 million. And it's like, anyways, just a funny name for a funny company.
Yes.
The big WTF. On to the next one.
All right. This was an awesome one. We need to make a Reddit sting just for comments on here. Rancher has the worst docs ever.
But it's.
Does it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've seen some of the docs I've written are pretty poor.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'd always heard VMware had the worst docs ever, but I think I might have heard that from a Rancher person. Yeah, it's bad. We had lots of conversations about how hard it is to make docs good.
Yeah,
but Ranchers are open source too, right? So if you don't like the docs, you can actually. It's hard as documentation.
Is all their documentation open source?
I thought it was. I thought they all had, without going to look right now, I thought it was edit this doc was like always there. You could always go and create a pull request and fix it if you didn't like it. But I'm going to eat my words probably. I would be pretty blown away if Rancher didn't have open source documentation.
I think one of the other missing aspects of documentation is I think you can add quick video clips now that would be able to help people, because you assume a certain level of knowledge when people come in to say, hey, like, are you new to OpenShift? Like, don't start here with this documentation and skip over this stuff. Like, these are the things you need to focus on. And it's different when somebody sees documentation and it's a huge, thick manifest of what to do and what not to do. It's a lot nicer when somebody says, these are the things that you should focus on, so I know where my time is being spent. Right? Like, if I'm getting into a tool, the first thing I want is like ping people like, hey, have you used this? Like, what do I need to watch out for? What should I do?
I think, but that's the kind of nuanced information that almost never makes it into documentation.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say is, like any tech application, documentation has technical debt too, because you've written something one way and your users are used to reading your documentation. but then new users come in and it's gotten so far away from the new user now that it's hard to bridge that gap. Right?
It is hard to bridge that gap. And I just started scrolling down to see what people were saying. I don't think, what are good alternatives? Oh, I didn't realize he was asking for alternatives to Rancher, not just the docs. Because I mentioned Kubernetes later in the show,
Yeah.
interestingly. So there's a little bit of a heads up for
Cube
people.
spray is a solid solution, -1.
Tanzu Community Edition -2. That was the one that I said had the worst documentation. Yeah. What
It's
is it
interesting
like?
that Tanzu says that they're opinionated.
Do they? Oh, yeah.
They gleefully mention it's opinionated, not really what you want. K8s is flexible, adaptable, and fairly cumbersome. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Interesting. Well, I got -2, so I don't know. Yeah, interesting. So I just went to a doc, and at the very bottom of every doc, it says edit this page if you don't like it. So help. It's an open source project, just like everything else.
Just like everything else. Yeah.
Just like everything else that we talk about, pretty much.
All right. Last WTF is a big one.
Oh, this is so big.
This is a good crappy communication, but good CNCF drama.
It's huge. Argo project graduation proposal. You stuck this in. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So February 9th, Argo went to become a graduated project. And yesterday, the day before, they got denied. You scroll down, Liz Rice, friend of the show, wrote the obituary.
Yeah, was it called that? That's pretty good.
Yeah, writing on behalf of the TOC. We're seeing a lot of usage by Argo, by end users. It's a very good sign. We'd like to see increased focus on security before graduation, including the assessment that has started and engagement with the Security Buddy program with Tag Security. In the interest of not leaving the PR open indefinitely, we recommend closing this one and reopening when security posture is clearer and issues from previous audit have been addressed. So a couple things. Tag Security has a buddy program now. It's actually kind of smart because CNCF security wasn't really brought in the conversation for all these projects. And so it's nice to, hey, you're a security team, like go to the security team, talk to them, pick one, and they'll kind of come in and just look at, hey, here are the vulnerabilities, here's the scanning, here's all this stuff that's going on. Kind of cool. Don't really know what the audit was. I never really saw it.
Yeah, you can. There's hints at the top, but yeah,
the drama is below.
Yeah. Well, this is it. This is Henrik Blixt. He's like the author of Argo, isn't he? He's like the main guy. He wasn't happy, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
He started getting into, like, we were told not to do a review. He's kind of pushing back, I guess, is it fair, without getting into the detail of it? I mean, it's there on the screen now.
Yeah.
I look at your gasp.
I think I don't exactly know what the security issues are. I will say this is one of the problems with security and security conversations. I think you mentioned it before. What'd you say about it? Security blocking GitOps again? Security blocking operations?
Well, it does seem like a classic trope. It was, here's a heavy ops product, and the Department of No said no.
Yeah.
And did it publicly in a very blunt and uninformative way.
Yeah. And I guess maybe, obviously, supply chain is a huge security conversation right now. So if there are any security concerns, it makes sense to pause it. I think after 6 months in something like this, where it's like close the PR, might not be the best way to go about it, because you obviously commented like, okay, if we close the PR, do we have to restart the entire graduation process again? Let's say you fix the security things, is it going to take another 6 to 9 months, right? It does take a lot of effort behind the scenes to become graduated. I remember watching Falco go through that same process. It's a lot of work. So I understand that you want more clarification on that aspect. On the security side, this is one of those things where you can't be nice and tell somebody no from security at the same time, right? No. You basically have to be, hey, these are the security issues you need to fix, and you will not get through without them. And maybe Liz doesn't want to be public with them to say, hey, we have some serious vulnerabilities, which I understand. I also think it's open source. And so if I'm if I'm going to use Argo, which is what I was experimenting with, and we'll get to that in a couple weeks for a demo, I want to know what the security issues that they're not fixing are, right?
Right. That was almost. It was almost. I was almost tempted to say the reason we decided not to do Argo CD today was because of its security vulnerabilities, but we don't even know what they are. So we don't really know the detail behind this. It's interesting because I like the writing on the behalf of the TOC, like don't shoot the messenger start there.
Yeah, it's so true.
But there is like, we need these things to be addressed. She does say call on the CNCF to instigate the follow-up audit, right? To clarify the security position has been improved, not just have somebody say, but it's been improved. Like if there's problems at the start, and there was, if you go back up to February, that I guess whatever needs to be done hasn't been done. And you mentioned it already. Gee, supply chain turns out is really hot in security right now. Like even if Argo CD people look at this and say this is over the top blocking it, is it over the top? Maybe this is one area where we can be a little bit over the top in terms of security, right? Maybe we do want you to change all the stuff or dot all the I's and cross all the T's on security for this one.
Yeah. And I think, how do I say this? I wish that Liz would say it like that, or / the TOC chairs would say it like that. If you really had an issue and you're saying, hey, listen, typically these security vulnerabilities we've let through before, we've learned this lesson, and you're going to be the first project to have to go through extra hoops because of all this stuff and because we're focusing and blah, blah, blah. Make it known and then hold the standard for the next groups that want to come through and graduate, right? It's just the whole, listen, if you're saying to fix the vulnerabilities and they're not fixing vulnerabilities, then tell everybody that, because I also want to know the projects that I'm using if they're choosing not to like have that as a focus, right? Like it's really hard to be nice and be secure at the same time. And so the CNCF as a TOC chair needs to kind of be like, hey, like, you know, this is not these are the security issues. But I also have a feeling that and this is my cynical hat, as a bunch of chairs and the CNCF are also staffed by people who work at companies as well. I think that there are also internal politics that go on about what people can and can't say publicly.
Totally. Oh, definitely.
There's just always some stuff, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
So fascinating. It is interesting because, like, my summary is that last comment is the last comment in there, and it didn't come across like there was some secret stuff that is happening in the back end. It came across like he wrote an answer that is like the answer I would have written. Like,
yeah,
if something's wrong, what is it? And I thought, oh, maybe there isn't more communication happening in the back. I don't know. It seemed that it looked rough. If I was the owner of a CNCF project and I was looking for graduation, that stream of conversation would worry me.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is kind of common in some projects in the CNCF. Like I remember the ambassadorship, for example, it's for the CNCF. It's basically apply and they don't respond. Right. And they review it every month. And it's like, that seems like weirdly non-confrontational, right? I mean, even with jobs, you kind of expect some sort of response, right?
Yeah.
And then if it's not, like, why don't you just say, okay, hey, we are going to reach out to ambassadors? Because the thing too is it's really annoying to not get feedback and to spend time if you're going to go and apply. It's the same thing with graduation. Like you're asking people to go and give up free time to do this stuff with no feedback. And it's, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way.
Smacks of arrogance.
So, should get, I mean, security, it's all about communication, and I don't know, just not a lot there. Maybe a little bit more next time.
A little bit more.
All right.
Good. Some good ones. Next section.
Let's go spend some money.
Yes.
Contrast.
Who's up first? Contrast Security expands cybertech to new markets with 150 million and a Series E. No, it was odd. It's not in this article, but I had somebody ask me and say, "Oh, are they bigger?" That completely out of the blue. Are they bigger than Aqua Security now? And I went, uh, and I looked at the two of them. Contrast has been around for 1 year longer, and they both are in Series E. They both got around that, and they both have a total investment of like 270 versus 271 million. It's like they look like clones of each other in terms
Yeah.
of when and what funding they got and how much they're valued at. But what Contrast isn't necessarily saying is kind of that Aqua, we're a unicorn. Ah! It just seems to be very subtle, like, yeah, we got some more money.
I wonder if that's a strategy.
I don't know. It's good. Yeah.
Maybe the more you parade yourself around as a unicorn, the less likely investors are to buy you out. Because there is a curve, right? It's like the longer you go and the higher your valuation, like the lower the percentage chance that you get bought
Yeah,
out. I
totally.
think once you get above $1 billion, it's like an 8% chance, or there's it, like, especially in terms of like the amount that you'll get.
Correct. It is.
But
you have to be pretty darn unicorny.
it's just hard to find a market fit if I'm a big company, right? Because as you get bigger, you take on more products and services. But then realistically, like if I'm a big company, can I monetize all those with my platform? Probably not. So you have to split
Probably
some
not.
off. Anyways, on to Contrast. We probably shouldn't talk about. I'm ranting.
Oh yeah, Contrast. Yeah. Well, Contrast. If you don't know Contrast, and not everybody might, because we're in cloud native, and Contrast started off in application security. They started off as an IAST solution, interactive application security testing, where you instrument the runtimes, mostly Java in the early days, and then later Node and Microsoft, so that you could watch both call sequence and data flow from the inside. So they coined a few phrases around it, but huge OWASP guy, Jeff Williams, was the sort of brainchild behind it all. And so they're doing some really clever things. They've had to pivot a little bit as cloud native and microservices made all of that really hard, and the diversity of tech stacks as well. So they've kind of kicked themselves in the backside and expanded what they do a lot, and in terms of combining indicators, like even like SaaS indicators and a variety of tools to enable them to bring something new to the table. So obviously other people thought that too and gave them a pile of money.
They're a unicorn. How many security unicorns are there now?
I don't know. It's almost like, remember when a unicorn was unique?
Yeah.
A special mythical creature. Now it's like, oh, look at all the unicorns. Maybe with just a standard horse, that would be all right to see these days. I don't know. Okie doke. Next biggie.
Hashicorp.
Hashicorp. This almost goes along with what you just said about, well, what do you do when you get too big? Hashicorp's been, how long has Hashicorp been around? Like longer, right?
2016, 2015?
I think it's
2012. The company was founded in 2012, but Terraform took off in 2015, I want to say.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, what were they thinking back in the early days? I wasn't paying attention to them, but
yeah,
you're right. Terraform took off.
Well,
and
it's interesting because their most popular product, which is probably Terraform, is their least monetized.
Oh yeah. And then followed by what? Vault also.
I think Vault's one of the higher ones, I believe.
Vault for managing passwords. Oh, as a like an actual return?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it's interesting. Hashicorp was last valued in the private market at $5.1 billion in 2020. So 6 or 7 now in 2021.
I think we actually covered that in an early show. It's insane, right? 5 billion. Yeah. You have to IPO at that point, right?
Yeah. A lot of companies are IPOing, and I think COVID has made it aware that IPOing and going public allows you greater flexibility in how you move money. That's all. It allows you to withstand like big changes because you have such a investment backed opportunity. When you're private, it's a lot harder, right? If you're like a private small tech firm, just changes impact you a lot harder. So, I mean, it makes sense. And also they're too big.
Do you think GitLab's success is like that was a huge litmus test for tech companies of this style to go IPO.
Yeah, I think it depends on the product.
Mm.
I think you have to be extremely sticky, right? GitLab works because data is sticky, and to a certain extent, Git is not going anywhere, and Git repositories are also means data. So it is a database. So it's like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. It's not really easy, and even though, yeah, okay, you're in Git, you can move it to GitHub. All of your CI processes need to change. So
Yeah.
when you have something like GitLab that comes with the CI process, and you've kind of cut a little bit of like Jenkins out of the picture,
Mhm.
now you're like really sticky because it's really hard to move now, right?
That's true,
So
actually.
it set the standard. I think it's a little bit different. I'm not exactly sure how Hashicorp's going to grow from here. I know that they're putting a bunch of stuff into Nomad, which I was a little
Really?
shocked about. Yeah, because I mean, you're seeing all these containers, and Kubernetes is kind of big and unwieldy sometimes. And so it's like, okay, well, you don't always need Kubernetes, right? We've had a couple talks about this.
Mhm.
Maybe you just need
Yeah.
some simple scheduler. And Vault. I think Vault's a big one for them.
And Vault. Yeah, I think pardon me. I think the potential is high. It just doesn't seem as, I guess you said, sticky or easily monetizable as GitLab.
Mhm. I think Vault's the big one, just because you're going to see hybrid multi-cloud, and you're probably not going to want to use a specific cloud vendor for
Mhm.
secret management.
Yeah, good point.
Mm.
Well, we'll see, right? What do we know?
Yeah, check back and quote us in 2 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Throw it in our face. This is what we live for. Here's the next one. I alluded to this earlier when that rancher documentation sucking thing came out, and this is actually, I didn't see an article about it. I just saw it on LinkedIn, and it was Sebastian Schiel. That's Julian, his co-founder. I do not know Sebastian. I know Julian, and they got seed funding, which is crazy because I've known Kubernetes for like, I feel like, a while, and
Mhm.
I don't. Oh, you only just got seed funding? Oh, good, because it's like, they said on the down low one time, like, we're like Rancher, but we're based in, you know, uh, we're the other version,
Yeah.
heavily focusing on compliance and making sure, but really leveraging open source. It's very similar,
Mhm.
but
I think
good.
now, yeah, now that Rancher is off the market, so to speak,
Hmm.
and other platforms are starting to get into K8s, right? Like, you mean, you have the big cloud providers, but there are also, smaller cloud providers. I mean, we have like small market cloud providers here in Canada. So there's always a space for an up and coming open source solution to use on-prem that doesn't come along and try to upsell you on other services as part of like this platform, right? Whether it be like OpenShift Tanzu or VMware Tanzu or Rancher or something like that, Rancher Suse, right? Those are kind of your three big on-prem hybrid cloud platform providers. It's like, okay, now there's space in the market for the
For
startups.
another one.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's great.
It looks, it's a pretty cool platform. So if you're looking for something that does that,
Maybe we
then
should try
grab
it
it
out.
and run, because it's only going to get better.
I was gonna say, I should try it out on the home server.
Yeah, yeah, give it a go. We can probably get one of them to come on the show as well, because they're pretty friendly. Like,
Nice.
it didn't take. I had a conversation with Julian when we were at StackRocks,
Oh, fun.
actually, about how, yeah, there's anything we can do as a security solution. But they were very focused on open source, so it's like, obviously it
Mhm.
wasn't a great fit, but maybe it is now. That kind of thing. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Worth checking these guys out if you like open source and Kubernetes stuff.
And if you like vulnerabilities, you're gonna like the next one.
Now, what starts with the letter C?
What, Palo Alto? Who approved this one? Come on.
Too funny.
Yeah, yeah. This is my employer, technically.
Yeah, I put it in the
But what
show
can I
notes,
say?
and I just said, dot, 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 look out.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, come on. This is like you ever watched Last Week Tonight when John Oliver ribs AT&T repeatedly and says, "Well, if you don't like it, where?" CVE 203064. You actually added this, and I commented that I actually have Global Protect running on this laptop. Protecting me and inadvertently allowing remote code execution.
Update and you're fine.
Yeah, that's essentially happened. I before this even came in, my computer updated probably ages ago. They showed way back here the timeline.
By the way, remember how we talked about operators? Another aspect. Security doesn't like updates, but it also likes it when it needs to.
Yeah. All right.
When you want a one-click update. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
All
right. All right, you're correct. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. It's funny, like when there's because Global Protect is a great distributed protection system for your laptop and it's VPN and it's what I use. But the idea that it allowed remote code execution, it wasn't ever exploited, but it's just interesting that releasing a security bulletin saying it was found. Yeah. Who is the Randori group though? That's interesting, right? This is them here. Was there anything about the CVE that you wanted to jump into before I hijack it to find out who the heck these people are?
No, do your thing. I just came across it. I was going to let you dissect it so that, because, it's only fair game to make you feel like the masochist.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's 9.8 remote code execution, and it was pretty significant. And I guarantee you there are some people that haven't updated it. Although I'm assuming if you're using that VPN, like you're part of an enterprise and they were made aware of this. So I doubt that there's any laggers. If there are, I don't know.
It
smart
enough. It does seem there's a live briefing on it. It looks like here soon you can register for, so we can find out more if we do that. How about that?
Cool.
I probably won't do that. I'll probably will just ask internally, seeing as I work here, and say what's the deal. But yeah, interesting. Even security companies every now and then have CVEs. Happens.
Yeah, and I think that the disclosure and the process, when it's handled well, it's part of it, right? Like you have a significant one. Not gonna lie. Okay, so the other example, because it's disclosed, Paolo's probably pushed all the big enterprises to say, hey, we're going to disclose this, you need to update, blah 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 blah. There's that whole process, right? I found the difference when I watched VMworld, and they were talking about their 9.8 vSphere client CVE being open to the internet, and they're like, well, VMware is secure, all of our features are secure, but people implement them poorly. And they basically were just kind of like, I seriously, I screenshotted it and I sent it to my team, and I'm like, you think we should say this?
No. That's not.
Listen, they're not wrong, and they do things like that, but the issue is, like, you have to understand the human aspect of it and then adjust. You can't just be like, hey, here's the option to do it, and then oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyways, it happens.
Wow. Yeah, that is.
I'll send a Snapchat. I mean, I'll send the screenshot. I'll bring it in WTF next week, because I seriously jaw dropped when I heard that.
Okay, we already have material for next week. That rocks. All right, our last one. 2 npm packages with 22 million weekly downloads, which sounds like a lot because it is. We're backdoored. Hey, how about that, right? I don't use npm. So Koa, a parser for command line options. Yes, so that is super used. And RC, a configuration loader, kind of similar, right? Tampered with by an unidentified threat actor to include identical password stealing malware. Supply chain attack. There it is again. And that's the way to do it. If you can somehow find the third party. That's also part of the video. We're kind of bookending here on supply chain. But there's a section of that video where he talks about first-party supply chain attacks and then third-party supply chain attacks, and how they were a first-party attack that created a third-party attack. And this is a third-party attack. Find the weakest link.
Yeah, and your image signing or anything like that won't do anything to check this, right? Like just because you have an image signed doesn't mean anything. So you need code scanning. You need to know your dependencies. That should all be checked at the developer level before it even gets pushed, right? Like that dependency management aspect,
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be like as shifted left as it can be, if you want to use
Well,
that term, right?
yeah, well, yeah, we can. The funny thing about so I only kind of know one way to find this, and
Yeah.
other than because if you were downloading it from npm, you could go get the SHA. It would all match because they approved it, right? So
Mhm.
you think this is the legit version, and it was the legit version because there wasn't another version.
Mhm.
But it's interesting how they got something into there. It says the malware sample knows databot variant, and it's kind of funny that it was there. Now the problem comes with whoever is doing the supply chain, the CI for these tools.
Yeah.
How did that happen, and how can I get involved with it? Well, probably if it's open source, easy. I just become a contributor for doing some innocuous nothing changes, and then submit a PR on Christmas or so when no one cares.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on the authors of whoever accepted it, obviously, but it happens. It's more of the what does that acceptance process look like, and when you get into dependencies and dependencies,
Yeah.
that's what was theirs. What was the dependency tool that we were looking at that was saying like, hey, here's your dependencies. Here are how many active contributors are on it. Here are the amount of companies that are using that dependency. So, like big companies using dependency, there's an investment that they are secure.
That was this, wasn't it? Was it
Was
this one?
Oh my gosh, it's scorecard.
I think it might have been scorecard for
No,
some
it is.
reason.
Yeah, when it was going through, right?
Contributors. There it is.
It was part
There.
of the checks.
Yeah.
Yeah, contributors code review. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
this is 100% something that is useful in that aspect. Like dependencies in those checks, it should be, hey, just because you're downloading a package, here's the score. There's 3 people maintaining it. Watch out. Like
Yeah.
you just the vectors, or let's say the ease of access is bigger into those projects, right?
It's funny. There's something that we don't have in here for the show, but I'm going to just mention off the cuff. One was the fact that thanks to Canary, which is the sandbox environment for malware, they have added some interesting tokens for finding secrets in containers. If you contain containers, so
Okay.
they're working towards their sandbox mechanism in a more modern sense to find containerized malware. So that was just announced, and I debated whether that was worth putting on the show. But now suddenly I feel like it does, because it is tools like Canary that can find things like this.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you run something in a sandboxed environment, and then you see the behavior of grabbing passwords and trying to communicate somewhere and doing something weird, that becomes obvious.
Yeah. And yeah, and realistically, if you had like a dev test prod and you had some sort of runtime security solution, you would catch all this before it even got to production.
That's the idea. Yeah, just the evidence, the anomalous actions of what should be totally fine software would get picked up. Yeah.
And the good thing about those builds too is it can happen with other developers. So the developer can continue working and pulling their dependencies, and then we have some offshoot and we look at the behavior, and then depending on what happens, we stop builds and we say, hey, by the way, devs, get rid of this. Right?
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it would something like this about using a runtime tool, whether that be any of our previous employers, that would rock the boat, because it would go all the way back through, and all the devs would be like, well, hold on, no, I definitely used the approved version of this library. It makes me wonder if that was how it got found in the first place.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah,
especially with that many downloads too. So it's one that will get caught, but the impact is so severe so quickly. Like it gets caught. Let's say building a pipeline it's like a virus, like almost like COVID. It's like day 3 we catch it. Are we sure? Let's start the communication. Then the weekend happens. Okay, come back on Monday. By that time, like another 1 million downloads have happened. And then
Yeah.
Monday they're like, oh, we need to start reporting this. And that,
Passwords are everywhere by then because it's so distributed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
that's bad.
Yeah.
All right, that was some good stuff.
Yeah,
and now it's over to you, though, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll make this quick because we're over an hour, but it's time.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Yes, it's a good thing that I decided to shrink the demo this week and go with Podman.
Nice one.
For those who don't know, Podman is kind of like a Docker alternative. So container runtime, same core libraries of run C, doesn't have the bulkiness of Docker. Docker has a client-server relationship, so Docker is always running as a daemon. It's in the background. If you use it on Mac, you've probably seen like the little icon at the top that you turn on and turn off. Docker's on. So, and especially if you look at memory, because Apple uses virtual machines for containers, you'll see, or not memory, storage, you'll see that Docker sits there and takes up like 60 gigabits on your computer automatically because it's a virtual machine. And it's like, hey, I need to store all these images and blah, blah, blah. So
I hate it.
Podman doesn't do that. It's daemon. It only runs when you activate the CLI. So the CLI is part of the process that is running the container. Does that make sense? Cool.
Totally.
Can also run in rootless mode, which it did before Docker, and then Docker came out with pretty quickly after. I remember Docker was always kind of working on this. It just really wasn't, I guess, asked for by users and enterprise at that point. And honestly, running rootless does have its own operational issues. When you want to get something done and you're not in rootless and you have somebody go in to try to network something, it's like, oh, well, if you don't know what you're doing, it can be slow, right? So that's another kind of annoying thing. It's just those are kind of the two big features of Podman. Is it's lightweight, it's daemonless, it can run as rootless, and it basically does everything that Docker does. And I'll show you what I mean by going to the CLI in a second. Oh, share. Oh, this is going back and forth in this UI is not the funnest thing to do. I'll say that.
I like the paragraph you just showed there while you were doing that. It said, simply put, alias Docker equals Podman. If you're wondering about the learning overheads.
Pretty much. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So this one doesn't really work, right? Nope. Can't do that one today.
No, it's that one, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I was kind of screwing around with it a little bit just to make sure that I had my commands set up. And I have Docker and Podman running on this computer. The annoying thing too is people are sometimes unaware of how Macs work. And so you have to actually run a Podman start and Podman run. I forget what it is exactly. And people are like, well, why do you have to do that? Because you said you're daemonless, and like that's the same commands that Docker has to run and all this stuff. And it's like, because you have to create the VM in Mac to run Podman, right? Otherwise it won't run.
Oh, right.
And so there's this whole explanation just because people don't really understand what Mac's doing. And it's like one of the last blogs there if you want to take a look. Anyway, so Podman, oh, that's not good. Oh, because I need
Missing command.
that.
Oh, that drives me nuts. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, this whole thing. So, I mean, all the same stuff: attach, build, commit, container, copy, create, difference between the files. You can see events. You can exec in, export, health check. One of the things I do like is there is, Podman kill, restart, stop, remove RMI. Like it's all the same stuff as Docker. So if you're used to Docker, it is there. One of the other big aspects too is you can run pods in Podman. So not just containers, but you can run pods. So just like you would in Kubernetes, create a pod, put 3 containers in there, network them all, and then you can understand how they'll all work in a pod, and then you can just take that pod and put it into Kubernetes. I don't know if Docker does that.
I don't know of it doing that. That's interesting. Are you gonna show that? Because that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So first thing is
I'll put you on the spot.
Pull some images first. So yeah, there's registry. There's Ksdb. Oh, that's the one I kind of just tried to download. Was what did I try to download? Ubuntu, Alpine, something like that. So let me do a
Do something big that blows up your internet connection while you're live.
Okay. Well, let me do a download
No,
first.
don't.
So it's typical Docker stuff. Podman run. What is it? Docker run. I need to find the registry. So you can pull. You can set the registry to pull from. It looks like if I say Alpine, it just pulls from Google. I know that
Oh.
Rel has. To hash. And it should run fairly quickly because I do have the image already downloaded there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Ding dong. Perfect.
You good? Pretty quick?
Yeah.
Exit, typical stuff. Let's do a. Hold on, let me remember how to do this. Podman, pod. Yeah, manage pods. Don't judge me if I get this wrong. I'm trying to remember. Let's just do a. I don't know if I need to add any extra commands to this.
Yeah, it does not need an image. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I already have it there. Yeah, so you create the pod and then you add the containers.
What? That's weird. Okay.
Yeah, it is. And so this is the one thing I find is really interesting. So Podman. So I want to use that test pod and I want to do a name. What do you want to call it? Alpine? We'll do Alpine.
Sure.
1. And we need, don't do this, security people, but to look away. Look away.
Yeah.
What's that from? Bridesmaids? Look away.
Look away. Look. Yeah.
She's in the street.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
While she's having a
after
a
that,
moment.
the lunch out. Yeah.
A bowel reconstruction.
Yeah. So, wow, look at that habit. I just started going like that. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. So there we go. Up 12 seconds ago. So created. So there's also the difference between created and then up about a minute ago. Oh, there it is. So there's one from 2 hours, which is me testing before he came on the show that was still running. And then this was one from 12 seconds ago that exited. So it just started and stopped because I didn't tell it to do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you didn't
Obviously.
put a sleep in there or whatever.
Yeah. And so this is me looking at all the containers that are running, but this is supposed to be in that specific pod. Now, how do I look at that?
Yeah, because I think people are used to thinking of pods as manifests, I suppose. Oh yeah, you didn't say which one.
Yeah. Okay, so now it's showing me, yeah, it's the same thing. So it says state degraded, it's gone, no port bindings, no nothing. So it's just showing me that, yes, there's 2 containers in that pod. This one that's running the infra and then Alpine. I think the infra must have been one that I just created as like a.
It says infra.
Yeah, but I never created this. So I'm assuming that when I run the Podman pod create test, it creates one that kind of sits there and does nothing.
Like in a net or something?
This part's actually new to me because I really never used pods like this. So when you're asking me,
yeah, it is.
Good, I'm like,
well, whatever. Yeah, that's the whole point. This is how user experiences look like. If somebody says alias Podman Docker, I'm like, all right. What if I type Docker pod? It doesn't work.
And then
so this is an area that's new.
Yeah.
What if can you get a manifest out then? Because you just did essentially an inspect, right? Like Docker inspect. And I know if they're treating pods like pods, is there a way if I am goofing around with pods using Podman that I can go, well, actually, -o YAML, is this going to spit out something and I would find functional?
Yes, I
in a
believe
Kubernetes
so.
cluster?
So there is, hold on. Yeah, so every Podman can build based off of Docker files. Podman inspect obviously returns JSON, but what you could do is you could technically take something like, I think JQ also formats to YAML, or maybe it just does it the other way. I'm pretty sure you can go
What?
back to YAML with JQ. Yeah, it'll give you the core aspects, but this is like one of the issues. If you build a Docker file and you embed the configuration of Kubernetes in there, it wouldn't really work the same. But I'm pretty sure
No, that's true.
Builda is the tool, I think, that takes your container and builds it and will give you a YAML, if I'm correct.
That's cool. We should try.
Yeah.
We'll do that as a thing at some point as well.
Yeah, they will not do what you expect. Podman manifest push. I'm reading this right now, working with container image manifest lists, and it's like using Podman Builda and Scopio.
Mhm.
And I guess this is kind of maybe one of the issues with Podman is it's not really clear like what Podman's used for, what Builda is used for, and then what Scopio is used for. I mean, they outline it in this blog, but if I'm just getting into it, it's like, well, I can just get the Docker UI, Docker desktop, and it's kind of has everything I need, right?
Well, I think so. Let me. Scopio is just for pushing stuff around. Is it not like going and getting this and putting it over there? Isn't that?
Yes, just for moving around manifests. Yes.
Yeah, and you can do it. Yeah. Okay. And build is just Docker. Sorry, Podman's just Docker. It's Builda, which you're like, what do I need Builda for?
Yeah, you're building all the images, but you can build with Podman too. So I don't know enough to comment on the differences.
Okay.
So let's just do test / see if it works. Right.
Interesting output.
Inspect. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Yeah, so you can create the manifests, but they're not Kubernetes. They would be like a Docker file or the equivalent of Docker Compose.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right. So yeah, you are setting it is a YAML file, and you are setting the network capabilities and all that stuff like you would in Docker. It's just not to YAML. And if there's any tools that would take a manifest and turn them into YAML for Kubernetes from Docker, I'm assuming that would work the same way as well.
Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
And Podman can build directly from Docker files. I mean, literally, Podman has a Podman build, which you can basically say Podman build dot, and if there's a Docker file there, it will build it. If you build it, they will come. Look, I have a Docker file there, so let's try this out. I don't know if it's going to happen because I'm pretty sure, I forget what image I put in there. Uh-oh.
Now you're just going to king your laptop and your internet connection.
This laptop's kind of a beast. Should be okay. Stuff. Latest, yeah, Podman building this container. So that should be fine.
Oh, yeah, there we go. So why would I use Podman over Docker?
Yeah, that is the question. So I'd say
now that Docker can run rootless, that's where that's my struggle.
Podman's lighter. It uses less memory. It is daemonless, if these are the things that you care about. If you're using something like the open source like Cockpit tool, and you're running in CentOS or RHEL or something like that, there is that in the UI you can say, hey, I want to add build tools, container build tools, and container runtime tools. And you can run basically everything like you would in Docker Desktop locally in like a virtual machine. Podman is OpenShift / Red Hat's Docker version tool, right? So it's lightweight. If you're getting into that ecosystem, it's probably recommended that you adopt that because the integration will be good. Now, if I guess the other question is like, how much container work are you doing locally? Because if you're a developer and all you need is just like and you're doing a web page and all you need is a container to make changes and then like automatically update it because you're doing some some stack where you're changing the UI and manipulating code and you want to see the effect automatically. It's like Docker, Podman, you kind of just use whatever tool your team's using, right? They're using Podman, use it. I would say there's no advantages to using Podman over Docker. I don't think anybody's going to sell you on, hey, it's a better alternative. I think it's just like, it's an alternative. It has all the features and functionality. If you're looking to get away from being hooked to Docker, it's a free option.
Right. That makes sense.
It's
I know in the past, some people, back in the Aqua days, people got hot on Podman simply because of the rootless part. They were like, we don't want to run Docker anywhere. We want to do all our builds with Podman. That's what we're doing now. And so it got a lot of traction. But beyond that, I was like, but why else would I care about it? I do like the idea of creating pods with multiple containers, because then there's kind of an advantage there.
Especially for testing.
Yeah, for testing, exactly. To make sure that you want to make sure that this and that talk nicely.
And as you get into like big, let's say, big architectures that are distributed and all microservice based and stuff like that, it's really good to basically say, hey, here's a pod, here it is. We don't have to put it into Kubernetes. We could just run it here. Like, you could technically run like a pod in a pod, add it into Argo or something like that, put it into like a workflow, and then you can test it all basically as part of a pipeline. Now that's a lot of over engineering, I think, but we're in IT and I'm sure somebody's tried it.
Damn right.
To me, the biggest thing is like, you can build it all. If you're in Cockpit and you're using open source in a UI, I can put it on my server. I don't have to run it locally. So I can just put Podman on my server with my UI, go in, build all my containers in there, and push directly from that. I don't have to have Docker Desktop on like this big machine sitting on my host that takes up 70 gigabits, 60 gigabits of storage. It's a big thing for me, but yeah, I don't know. I honestly like need to get a little bit more into it. There are some security things in here, like there's secret storage, there is hashing, there is the ability to do container image signing fairly easily with Podman. And what am I blanking on? And not Sigstore. Why am I blanking on the and Cosign? Yeah, in fact, because Podman originally was a Red Hat project that got open sourced, right? But VMware at VMworld, VMware at KubeCon did a talk about container image signing with Podman and Cosign.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and I watched that. I'm like, this is funky. I don't know, and because I don't know if I don't think they have the functionality right now, and they don't have their own container tool, right? So they'll use Podman or Docker or whatever their users bring to them. So they're kind of like, okay, well, it's open source. Like, we support this. If this is something as part of your workflow, like VMware is all for it. You want to sign your stuff? Cool. But yeah.
Nuts. Cool. Well, that was a good little intro, and we're going way long, so it was good it was short.
Yeah, it's good. It's Friday. It's the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. All right. That's a good thing. Let's wrap it up. What do we got planned next week? Anything exciting that we know about so far?
Well, I think we have to Argo next week now.
All right, we have to do Argo. Yeah, we promised it. All right.
Yeah.
Then
give me some time. We'll set it up.
Yeah, we'll both take a crack at it, because I read an article like an hour ago, or no, not an hour ago. Must be 2 hours ago now, about how to build Argo for the Pi.
How about because Argo has multiple projects for those who are watching. Sorry to interrupt. How about you do workflows and I'll do CD?
No, let me find out what I can build for the Pi, and then come back to you. And you do the other one, because if I want something that does what Argo does on this, because that's going to help me.
Yep.
And plus,
Sounds
this is in-house. It's security. Who cares, right?
Same with mine.
So, yeah.
But yeah,
so I
you'll
can
get a 2-in-1 demo next week. So I think we'll go light on the programming so we don't take an hour, and then we'll do half an hour demo.
There we go. Perfect. All right. This has been our longest show ever, I think, maybe. But that's what happens. Busy week, lots of vulnerabilities, lots of stuff, lots of big spenders. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been amazing. Time to sign off.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take care.
So